Today is August the 12th, 1998. We're in Houston, Texas at the 12th Armored Reunion. My name is Charlie Henson, and this morning I am interviewing Glenn Cleland. He's headquarters 17th Armored Infantry Battalion. This morning we're going to start with who your parents were, their full names, and brothers and sisters, and kind of who was at your home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, 7 children in our family. I was in the middle of the line, I guess. All 3 brothers and 1 sister were older, and then I had 2 younger sisters. One of my younger sisters ended up being a registered nurse. My oldest sister, after she graduated from high school, she went to business college and ended up doing work for the county government, worked in several of the offices in the county government. And then my brother that was next to her spent most of his time working for the Studebaker Corporation and Bendix in South Bend. My next brother, George, he ended up most of the time driving truck and helping my dad with farming. And next brother, Joe, he was a good carpenter, and he worked for Standard Oil of Indiana as a carpenter and traveled all around the state working on filling stations. And then I came along, and I helped my dad farming quite a while, and then I had a peculiar situation. My dad had the job of hauling corn ensilage away from a canning factory that was canning corn, and we hauled to nearby farmers. And during the summer, I had a appendix operation, so I wasn't allowed to lift anything, but I could still drive the truck. But it was about 10 o'clock one night. I had been out to a farm east of Rochester and unloading my load, and on the way back, I caught the spinner on the steering wheel in my sleeve, and I went through another farmer's fence. And he owned 3 livestock semis besides his farm, and so he heard me go through the fence, and he came down and helped me get out. And I told him I'd be back as soon as I could do it and fix up his fence. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it." He said, "There's somebody going through it all the time anyway." But anyway, it wasn't but a matter of a week or 2 till he called me and wanted to know if I'd like to drive for him. And he hauled, at this time, the war was, going on early in the war, and he asked me, if I'd like to drive. And he hauled a lot of horses out of Kansas and Kansas City into Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York for hauling ice and milk and things like that. So I talked it over with my dad and went to work for him then, and till they called me into service. And so, but anyway, I had some long-distance truck driving service behind me now. And then I have a younger sister that after high school, she worked in some of the stores in Rochester, and she ended up at Western Union, I guess it was. And then my youngest sister, she's a registered nurse. She graduated from Indiana University School of Nursing, and she worked around Rochester for a while. And after she got married, her husband had some relatives in Idaho, and so they moved to Denver. Then they moved on to Idaho. and so she's really the most educated, I guess, in the family. And
What is your mother's full name?
my mother's full name was Rita Baldwin. Well, and after she was married, I was Cleland, Rita Baldwin Cleland. There was quite a few of the Baldwins around Rochester. Dad was Lewis Herman Cleland, and he had several brothers and one sister is all I ever knew. They got scattered. They had family in, I think, Oregon, and the one sister was spent most of her time around Cleveland or Detroit, something like that.
Tell me about graduating and how you got into the Army.
And what's that now?
Tell me how you high school and then how
okay.
you got into the Army.
I graduated from high school in 1939, and of course, like all the young fellows, when you had to sign up, why, of course, I done that, and when the time come close to being drafted, by a couple of my friends and myself went to Indianapolis, and we tried to get into the Navy. One of the boys made it, and I didn't, so I couldn't pass the eye test because of, they say I'm colorblind. Well, if you ever took their test, what they do is to make like numbers or letters out of similar colors, like say they'd have a 2 and make it out of 6 or 8 different colors of yellow or something. I had a hard time picking the numbers out, so I didn't get in the Navy. But when the time come for the draft, why, I made it. So I ended up in the Army and at Fort Benjamin Harrison and in Indianapolis, and then I guess when we got a train load there, why, they shipped us to, well, at that time it was Camp Camel, Kentucky, and it was right on the Kentucky and Tennessee line. So I ended up in Camp Camel in October of 42, and I was with the 12th Armored until January 18th of 45, when I was captured by the Germans.
Let's talk about a little bit about Camp Campbell. Were you one of the first men to go in?
Yes. There was very few people at Camp Camel when we got there, and they were still in the preparation stage, you might say, because there wasn't too many buildings, and then the streets and roads were nothing but clay, and if you'd had it rain like this, every time you took a step, you'd be about 2 inches taller the next time. Oh, it was a mess. But then I saw it grow, and like I say, I was one of the very first ones there.
Now, what was your training like there? What was the training like at Camp?
Well, as far as I was concerned, it was good training. We had good cadre. They had sent mostly old line soldiers from Fort Knox to train us, and we learned the routines of marching and in real life situations. I spent a lot of time. I was in the machine gun platoon, and I spent a lot of time on the infiltration range, which is they have barbed wire, and well, it's where they train soldiers to be in battlefield situations. We used to fire over the soldiers, and then they would crawl under the barbed wire, and so I spent a lot of time with that, because we trained the tankers and everybody that but we had the guns fixed so they couldn't drop or change any. And but then, of course, about once a month, why we'd end up walking or marching, say 25 miles in a day, and maybe full pack, and with all of our guns and everything like that. And so you had to do that in 9 hours, supposedly. Most of us did, but some people would have to drop out, of course. But we had a lot of night training. Went to the rifle range a lot. So, and of course, I had to be different. I could only close my left eye, and most of them, I guess, is supposed to be the right eye, and they thought I was an oddball, but I held my own.
Were there different levels of competence on the guns?
Oh yes, there was. Different competence was different between people because it's just like sports. You got some people that can play baseball and some can't, or some people can play basketball and some can't. It's the same way on shooting. Some people can hold the gun steady and some can't.
What did they do with somebody who couldn't? Did they move them to another?
Well, sometimes they worked with you day in and day out, maybe. And then there's other people that if they just couldn't do it, well, they'd be transferred to some other organization or some other job that you wouldn't have to be like a mail clerk or something like that,
When you think about Camp Campbell, is there one incident that stands out in your mind? Or one
Well,
person?
I guess the thing that stands out the most was how muddy it could get. That was the thing that it was new. Streets hadn't been paved, and I guess that was the thing that really stood out. How they did have maybe some board walks, but then still there's times you'd have to get off and get in the mud, and you carry that mud into the barracks, and it was a mess for a long time.
Did they make y'all keep your barracks clean?
Oh
just
yes.
normal?
Yes. Just about every week you'd have a inspection, and it would get pretty tough sometimes.
Tell me about the maneuvers. Your experience.
Well, that's we did go to have the Tennessee maneuvers, and it was set up similar to what battlefield conditions might be, and some nights we didn't get much sleep, just like you would in wartime, and Tennessee can be pretty rugged. There's some mountains, and there's some big rivers, and so we had some, as far as I was concerned, real good training in Tennessee maneuvers.
What was your position during the maneuvers?
Well, I was I was in a machine gun platoon, and we would have to move around and set up in positions that we could find that would be comparable to what you'd have in wartime, and so we didn't shoot any live ammunition in maneuvers, but then everything else was simulated like it should be.
Tell me about when you got the word that you were going to be moving out, and how you found out that you were going to Texas.
Oh, I really can't say that I really remember exactly how we found it out, but we did find it out on while we was on maneuvers that we was going to. We wasn't going back to Camp Camel, or we was going to go to Camp Barkley in Texas, which I guess was all right. We knew it was going to be a little warmer, but then and we was going to probably get away from some of the mud, but I guess I didn't really care about going that far from home, but then had to go anyway.
What was your first impression of Camp Barkley in that area?
Well, of course, if you had ever seen Camp Barclay and their barracks, why, your first impression wasn't very good, because the barracks was not much bigger than this room, but it was nothing but plywood barracks, and of course wood floors, but very crudely put together, I'd say, and it was, of course, no grass either there. But it was a lot bigger than Camel. But it was a matter of roughing it. I'll say that at Barclay when we first got there. And of course, one thing that bothered me, I guess, my mother passed away when I was in Barclay, and when I left the camp, we was a regiment, 56th Regiment, and I got back after the funeral, and they had changed over to the battalion. I had an awful time finding where I was supposed to go, but because I didn't know I was going to be in the 17th when I left. So when I got back, that's what I found out I was in. But I guess I found somebody that straightened me out on where I should go, but it was different, I know.
Tell me about the men that were in. Now, were you put into headquarters at that time?
Yes.
Right then?
Right.
Okay. Tell me about your captain and what you did, and kind of describe what your job was at Barclay.
Well, I was, I guess like most others, you trained with your platoon, and sometimes you trained with the whole company. I was already in the machine gun platoon while we were a regiment, and actually, I guess you'd say we didn't really change that much from regiment to battalion, other than just name-wise. And I had met my, of course, the company commander, and I got along real well. We knew a mutual person, and he had worked with a friend of mine, and so he never put me on any details I don't think that he wouldn't have wanted to do himself, and so all the time that I was under him as company commander, we got along in real good shape.
What was his name?
Captain Eugene Blackford, and big fella. But anyway, I could maybe bring this up when Captain Blackford was, I guess, some kind of an officer in the CCC camps. Had something they had during the Depression for boys that couldn't find a job anyplace else. But anyway, this Captain Blackford worked for a fellow by the name of Harry Rosenberry. They worked together. Harry was a neighbor of mine, and he was a graduate of Purdue University and with a degree in forestry. And they had sent him up to Michigan to be in charge of the tree planting project. And Captain Blackford was on that same project. And when when Captain Blackford, the first day we was in Camp Barclay, about 7 o'clock at night, he started calling everybody that had came in that day that was in headquarters company. He called them into the office and interviewed them personally. When you went in, you had to give him your name and where you was from. And of course, I said Glen, Cleland, Rochester, Indiana. Oh, he says, do you know Harry Rosenberry? Oh, I said, I sure do. I just held his daughter on my lap last week. We lived about a mile apart, and he had a 4-year-old daughter. I've talked to her since. I guess maybe I stretched that a little bit. She says she's probably closer to 3, because she had forgotten all about it and didn't really know about it. But she said, well, age-wise, I must have been about 3 instead of 4. So anyway, we've talked about that several times since. But anyway, it didn't hurt me to know Harry Rosenberry. And so, like I say, we got along real good with the captain. And,
Who was your platoon leader at that time?
Sergeant Mashburn. He was an old horse cavalry soldier, and he had been a policeman in Chicago. But he was older than most of us, but he was a real fair man, and so I didn't have any trouble getting along with him. He was all right. And we visited him several times in Chicago after the war, and fact is, he's really the fellow that got me in the 12th Armored Association, because fact is, I think probably he paid my first year's dues, as I remembered anyway.
What year was that you became a member of the association?
Oh, I don't really remember, but it was probably the early 50s. So I was taking the 12th Armored News ever since then. But I never started participating in these activities until must have been about 1986. After I retired, I started coming to the meeting.
Tell me, is there an experience at Barclay that stands out in your mind, or a person?
Nothing that I can really think of as particular at Barclay. We used to go out in the field and train there, and they had a big hill that was, they called it a mountain, but Buffalo Gap, I guess, is what it was called, and we used to go out there a lot. It was, I don't know, because I remember 10, 12 miles from camp, and the boys really learned to run in convoys driving that far, because in a convoy it's just common that you drive fast a little bit and then it slows up. What they do is the vehicles get too close together, so they start spreading out, and that makes them slow down, and then they'll start getting back close together again, and they pick up speed. But that helped them a lot to learn to try to control that. But I can't really think of anything as far as that we learned special, other than, let's say, we did walk maybe 25 miles, probably about once a month, full pack, and it would be real tiring. You didn't feel like doing much that night after you got back.
What was in your pack, and how much did it weigh about?
Well, of course, if you carried full pack, you carried your blankets and your equipment for eating, and I carried the tripod for the machine gun, which was I think about 39 pounds, and then part of the time I was equipped with a pistol, and then they changed that and gave me a M1 rifle, which was, I don't remember now, 17 or 19 pounds. And then they changed that later on and gave me a carbine, which was 7 or 8 pounds. So I suppose, if we carried ammunition and a full pack, why, we probably carried 60 or 70, 80 pounds. So, it was enough to weight you down. Most of us, like then, I probably weighed 130, 135 pounds. about everybody in my squad was small, it seemed like, and we had to carry more weight than some of the other people.
Tell me the difference between the headquarters doing in other
Companies, you mean?
companies. I mean.
Well, in the way the battalion is set up, headquarters company, practically like the others, other than we had the heavy equipment. We had water-cooled 30 caliber machine guns. The line companies or the letter companies had air-cooled 30 caliber machine guns. And they had 60 millimeter mortars. We had 81 millimeter mortars. And we had 4 light tanks in our company. The other companies didn't have any tanks at all. And generally speaking, that's about the way the 3 infantry battalions were set up. So, like I say, they had more rifle squads, and we didn't have any rifle squads. We had rifles, but then no squads. We were the heavy equipment for the battalion.
What kind of tank did you have?
Well, of course, myself, I rode in a half-track, and we had what they called, they were light tanks. I don't remember the numbers as such, but we had 4 of them, and they called them assault gun platoons, is what they were called. So, but like I say, they were light, very maneuverable, and but I never really got involved in that because right from the very start I was put in a machine gun platoon, and that's where I stayed.
Let's get to Europe. Let's get us from Barclay to Europe.
Okay. Well, of course, we went from Barclay to New York in the train, and actually that's quite an experience. They didn't use just one railroad. They used different railroads. Some of the people went from Texas into Chicago and on east, and some of them took southern railroads. We didn't all goes the same rate or train. We went to Camp Shanks, New York, just outside of New York City, and I don't really remember how long we were. Probably in the preparation and the moving, it probably took a month. And then we was only in Camp Shanks a week or so before we all got on the Empress of Australia and went to Liverpool, England. We was a couple of different places in England while we were there before we went across the Channel. It's quite an experience. I was fortunate enough to get to London overnight or on a weekend pass, but then they had buzz bombs going then, so it wasn't all that safe either to be in London. So, and like I say, I was able to get to London once, and I experienced something that I've never had since. Either went to church. I don't think it was on a Sunday, but then the fellow that was with me, we went to a church where they sing everything and mumble everything. It was a little different than chanting, they call it, I guess. I had never experienced that, but I don't know, that's something that sticks with you. The fellow that went with me, he was from Montana, and he was later killed in action. But that's about the thing that stands out. But every now and then you'd hear the sirens blow, and it would be another buzz bomb attacked. So that's about what stands out about
So you
London.
felt under fire even before you got to France. I mean, there was a feeling of being under
Oh
fire.
yes, yes, right. Yeah,
Safety.
that's right. Which from the buzz bombs, not air raids or anything, but from the buzz bombs. Yes, you had the feeling that it could get worse. You knew that. Then when we went across the channel, of course, a lot of it was done in the dark. You couldn't see very well, and nothing really stands out about that. I guess it was what I figured by that time. It was routine. We didn't, of course, see, we went 4 months after the D-Day, so they had things worked out pretty well by this time, and the worst of the fighting was over in, at the beaches and all. So we drove several hundred miles after we got into France before we ever got to the front lines.
Do you have any impressions or anything how you felt as you got to Europe? Is there anything that stood out, or you were how old? How old were you when you hit France?
Oh, I was 22 or 3, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So how did that feel, landing in Europe and knowing where you were going?
Well, it preys on your mind because you don't know how much longer you might be around, and you don't know who you can trust and who you can't, because looking at the civilians and all, you don't know whether they might be soldiers or want to kill you. Or, like I say, it's a feeling that you don't have here in the States, because you don't worry about most of those things. But over there, you have to keep your eyes open and ears open and look around. So I'd hate to do it again.
Do you remember the first day of action that you saw?
Oh, not that much about it. I guess maybe early on, the first few days, we were up at the front, but still, the majority of anything that was going on was sniper action, and so not really as far as what I can remember. There was at one time we was on one hill, and we dug in, and then across the river and on another slope on the other side of the river, the Germans were dug in, and you could get out and walk around. They didn't fire at us, and we didn't fire at them, and it's just kind of hard to believe some of the things that goes on. But then too, when 5 minutes later, why then all kinds of shelling might be going on. I can remember that I had a boy from Arkansas that had a foxhole dug next to me, and when they got started shelling us then, and boy, he kept a-hollering, "Let's get out of here, let's get out of here, we're going to get killed." And I said, "You just stay in your foxhole, we'll be all right." So shelling stopped, and then I don't know, we was there a day or two, and then we moved on out. But you just never know when your time might come. After that, then I think we went into rest area for a while, and then Battle of the Bulge started. And then they put us back in the line, and we relieved the 4th Armored Division, and then they moved up to help at the Battle of the Bulge.
Tell me about that. Tell me about going into the Battle of the Bulge and
Well, see, we really weren't in the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay, so you
This,
came after to...
yeah, because we, like I say, we relieved the 4th Armored, and they went north, but and some other outfits even went north to help in the Battle of the Bulge, and that's the lines thinned out. I mean, with soldiers where we were at, and this is when we were in what the Germans called Operation Nordwind at Herlesheim, and they had decided that it was a good time to attack because they thought the lines were thinner than what they really were, but they were thin compared to what they were before the Battle of the Bulge. And when I got captured, why we was in the town of Herlesheim, and the Germans then infiltrated back in town during the night and moved in some tanks, and we was in the barn during the night of the 17th of January, and the Germans moved some big tanks up to, say, half a city block or so from this barn, and they was doing some firing, and we knew that if they wanted to, if they turned that gun on the barn, why, I probably wouldn't be here today. So, and we didn't have anything that would knock them out. All we had was their machine guns and rifles, and so the Germans then during the early morning came walking down the street, the soldiers, I mean, and so they got up to our barn, and we didn't, we could, like I say, we could have we killed some of them probably, but then if they had turned the gun on the barn, I wouldn't have been here. Every time they fired that 88 on the tank or that barn, you just feel it jump, from the concussion, and that's how I happened to get captured. But at the same time, they got the company commander and the battalion commander, and they weren't in the same barn with us, but then within a matter of hours, they had captured those people and us and a lot of others.
Tell me who your captain was and about those men that you knew that were captured and those that were with you. Some names, if you remember those.
Well, I can't remember too many of them. Clarence Smith, Red Smith, he was from Chillicothe, Ohio, was captured in another barn, but and he got captured, I think, about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was captured about 4 o'clock. And but really, as I remember, there was 15 or 20 of us in the barn. Some of them was from some other companies and things, and I can't remember the names. It's just been too long.
What did that feel like, knowing that you were fixing to have to, that you're going to have to surrender?
Well, it's not a very good feeling, and it's the furthest thing from your mind. I never had any idea we was going to be captured until it happened. You feel safe. The day before, why the Germans had came running at us, hundreds of them with their hands up in the air, and gave up. But like I say, it was the last thing that I ever thought would happen. I just never... you're worried more about getting killed or something than you do being captured. So when you start thinking about it, why, it just comes all at once, and you haven't thought anything about being captured before. So, and it's something new to have to put your hands up in the air or your hands behind your head and walk for miles before they let you put them down. So it's not a feeling that you really like to have, that's for sure.
Did you have any, how many in your platoon were captured with you?
Well, my squad, there was 5 of us at the time, and then I know that the Sergeant Smith, he had a squad just exactly like I had, so I guess he had probably 5 that was, and I think that, see, we had 4 machine guns in our platoon, but I think only the 2 of us was captured. The others was in different areas, and they didn't get captured.
So tell me the process of surrender, and then where they took you and what happened.
Well, they marched us, I don't know exactly what it was, 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers, and we ended up in Baden-Baden, Germany, and that's where they interviewed us and put us in an old schoolhouse, what we were in for a while. The fellow that interviewed me had worked at the Willys Corporation in Toledo, Ohio, and he could speak English as well as anybody in this room. And a young fella, but he had worked for Willys Jeep, and he had gone home early in the war to Germany, and I found out as much about him as he found out about me, I guess. But anyway, he had gone over there, and then they wouldn't let him leave. The war was picking up speed, and but he wasn't that rough or gruff as some of them. But like I say, he had asked me questions, and of course all I was allowed to tell him was name, rank, and serial number, and that's all I did tell him. But he could tell me different things about our outfit that I didn't even know, because he had interviewed boys previously to me, and he did find out some things. But so, like I say, I got a kick out of this fellow interviewing me, and I have talked to some PWs since that I think the same fellow interviewed them that interviewed me, because they had talked about the fellow had worked for Willys Jeep in Toledo. I mean, I had some experiences that, I don't know whether you've ever heard the story about General Patton trying to get his son-in-law out of prison camp in Nuremberg. Have you heard that one? Well, I happened to be in that camp too.
Well, tell me about that. You were there. You were eyewitness.
But in Nuremberg, they had some officers, quartered probably half a mile from us, in one compound, but it was late in the afternoon. We started hearing some gunfire, and we knew something was happening, but we didn't know what. And it was this, they call it a strike force that Patton had arranged for, and most of them was the 4th Armored Division, and we was about 40 miles from the front when this started, and I don't know how he found out that his son-in-law was in that camp, but even, I don't know whether you was in on interviewing Marvin Drum, but Marvin was in the same compound with Patton's son-in-law. And we talked about this at length several years ago in Omaha. Of course, see, Marvin, early on in my service, Marvin was my lieutenant, and then he got transferred to A Company, and I had more or less forgotten about him, but we got to talking in Omaha at one of these meetings and put 2 and 2 together, and he told me the story about that. So it was, there's been books written on it, and so like I say, I like to think I was involved in something important. Although we were about a half a mile away, but the Germans got real excited, and they moved us out then the next day. So I forget where we walked to, but anyway, we left camp and went to another one. But you never know what's going to happen next, that's for sure.
Did they feed y'all well, or what did y'all do to survive in there?
Well, of course, they certainly didn't bend over backwards to take care of us as far as food or warmth. I was either quartered most of the time in some old horse barns that their cavalry, of course, at one time they had mostly cavalry as their troops and lots of horses. So I was always quartered in horse barns, it seems like, or in boxcars sometimes. And then we'd even walk sometimes between camps. I was in 5 different camps in 3.5 months. So never one place too long. As far as, say, being beaten or anything like that, I was never beaten, never hit with a rifle butt or anything, but the Germans were so loud, talk so loud and gruff, they can scare you to death with their talking. And of course, most of us fellas grew up in the Depression, and we were used to somewhat hard times. Didn't have lots of good food and anything, but our food was, at least most of the time what I had, was either sawdust bread. Maybe we'd divide a loaf, from anywhere from 4 to 9 people. Might have to last you a couple of days. And then potato peeling soup, and they forgot to wash the potatoes. So you got the dirt and everything with the potato peeling. Once in a while, if you were walking from one camp to another, you might find a farmer that had some carrots or some cabbage or something buried, and if you could get out of line long enough to get some of those, well, you might have a carrot to eat or something, but the food was pretty poor. And everybody, of course, lost weight, and quite a bit of it. I was very fortunate. The International Red Cross and the American Red Cross both tried to get packages to you, which would consist of some cookies and liver pate or patty and some sugar and maybe some cookies, some cigarettes. I was fortunate because I didn't smoke and I could trade my cigarettes for something, but you get a package that isn't much bigger than that ice box there. It doesn't last very long. And you usually had to divide that up between 2 people or 4 people, something like that. Like I say, I was fortunate that we was able to get some packages. Some people I've talked to said they never got anything like that. It all depended, I think, on where they had them stored, how fast the Allies was making them move, and things like that. There were just several reasons why some people got them and some didn't. But I still say that if it hadn't been for the Red Cross, I probably wouldn't be here. I really think that, because you get pretty hungry, you get pretty weak.
On the forced marches, did most of y'all survive those forced marches from camp to camp, or would they be considered forced marches?
Oh, well,
from camp to camp.
Yes, it was. But the thing that really helped there too, most of the time that you marched, you were guarded by old people. They would be maybe 60 years old or 65 years old. And they weren't the rough, tough soldiers like that was at the front line. So generally speaking, in walking from one camp to another, they might holler at you and prod you some, but then they never, I never saw them shoot anyone or anything like that. And a lot of people talk about it, but I have never, as my knowledge, I never saw anybody that was shot or treated, well, maybe it was inhumane, but I mean it could have been a lot worse than any time I marched. They didn't make you speed. You walked at their speed. They were older people, and they just took their time.
What stands out in your mind about that time? Or how did you survive? How did you work your mind?
Of course, we felt that the war couldn't keep going much longer, and that was one of the things that helped you, because you always looked forward to, well, things are getting tougher for the Germans. They just can't hold on much longer. You just had that feeling, and I think that's what helped a lot of people survive. I didn't try to escape. A lot of people tried to escape, but I didn't feel that I wanted to take a chance on getting shot, especially when I felt that in a matter of a week or two or maybe a month, the war would be over, and that's the way it eventually ended too. So I didn't provoke them any to try to do anything that I shouldn't.
Was there rumors and stuff like that about? I've heard people talk about. We heard rumors of the Americans were coming and stuff. Did you hear things like
Oh,
that?
yeah,
And if you
yeah,
did, how did those rumors get started?
Oh, some people come up with some radios, different places, and you'd find out somebody had a radio, and that's how some of those things got started and handed down, and go from one compound to another or something, and that's. But I never really saw any radios, to my knowledge. But and then you'd get some new prisoners in maybe once in a while, and they'd come in with some stories, and too, you could hear. Of course, the airplanes flew over day in and day out, and you could hear them bombing someplace not too far away, and if you'd see the fighter planes, P-38s and P-47s and things, you knew you wasn't too far from the front, because they didn't get too far inland, or away from the front. So you could always put two and two together and see what was happening, and that was always a confidence builder as far as thinking that things was going to change before too long.
Were you in close proximity to the other gunner that you were captured with?
Well,
did you stay in contact with people you knew?
Well, very few, other than the Sergeant Smith was, like I say, was from Chillicothe, Ohio, and I was captured about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he was captured about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the second day of our capture, somehow or another, we got put together, and we stayed together till we came home, and but ordinarily, in most situations, when you'd move from one camp to another or something, they'd get separated, and they'd take you maybe 100 here and move you out, and so a lot of times you got separated from. But he's the only one that I stayed with that I could say I really knew. I did run into, at one camp, I did run into a fella from my hometown, but he was in the Air Corps and had been shot down. But he's really the only one that I could say that I ever knew while I was captured.
So what is the thing that kept you going during this time?
Oh, I think it was the fact that, let's see, I was captured in January, and the Allies had moved so far, well, say from D-Day, that you just felt like, well, this thing, the Germans just can't keep going. They didn't have the means to manufacture, and the bombs had, and the Allies had destroyed so much stuff for them, and you did, like I say, in your own mind, you could see that there's just no way that they was going to keep going. Sure, they could do a lot of damage, but then I think that's the thing that kept me going, was that I felt, well, it just can't last long.
Tell me about the end and when you were liberated and kind of the ending part of that.
Well, when I was liberated on April the 29th, and we had walked from Nuremberg to Moosburg. Moosburg was not too far from Munich, really, and they had marched us south and was trying to get us away from the front, of course. But we could still see. We wasn't so far away that we saw fighter planes, and of course bombers would come over and bomb different things. But we just, like I say, felt that the thing wasn't going to last that much longer, and the older guards was getting. I guess you'd have to say they were getting scared. They knew that things wasn't good. So they didn't treat us too bad. They left us get out of line and find rutabagas and carrots and cabbage, and that's helped us keep going too. So, like I say, April 29th sticks out pretty well in my mind. And at Moosburg there was something over 20,000 soldiers, Allied soldiers in that, because they kept moving them there, and I go to XPOW meetings, and a lot of times they'll have you stand up and introduce yourself and tell you or ask you what camps you was in and where you were liberated, and I would think that if you asked 10 soldiers, I bet 7 of them would say they were liberated at Moosburg. It's just, I've been to different meetings where that has sounded about true. But Moosburg wasn't a very good camp either. They didn't have very good food because it was getting towards the tail end of the war, and they didn't have much to give us either. So.
What kind of things did they give you? What did they give you to eat?
Give us to eat?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was either old cabbage, maybe boiled, or maybe, let's see, potatoes. Not the meat of the potato, but the potato peeling. Or and then we got either black bread or sawdust bread, and you'd have to divide that between 7, 8, 9, 10 men, and that was about it. It wasn't. The bread was hauled in on wagons, just like they'd haul corn or something else. It wasn't wrapped or anything. It just stacked on a wagon and pulled behind a team of oxen or a team of horses. Not very clean, but if you're hungry, I guess you can eat it.
Tell me about the day.
About which?
The day that you were liberated. Morning.
Oh, the day I was liberated.
Tell me about that
Well,
day.
well, the 14th Armored liberated us at Mooseburg. It was right towards noon, I guess, when we started seeing and hearing the tanks coming, and so it was quite a day because everybody knew they were released, and of course you always have to have somebody in control, and I don't remember who it was anymore that they put in control of the camp, but then it was orderly, I'll say that, other than the fact that everybody did celebrate. But they said just as soon as they could, they'd arrange for us to get out of there. But we was there until May the 8th. We were liberated on April 29th, and then May the 28th they flew us or took us to aerodrome not too far out of Munich, and then put us on planes and hauled us to Camp Lucky Strike back in France. So we were real fortunate in getting out early, and I was home then by I think the second day of June, which I'm real fortunate because a lot of people was over there a year or more after the war was over.
Then you had a lot of points because you went on early, right?
Well, no, I didn't. I didn't have enough points to get out when I got home.
So how did that work?
Well, of course, the more you was overseas, the more points you got, and I really wasn't over there that long. I was over in September, but then some of those fellows had been through Africa and Italy and been over there for years. So I was only over there about 6 months. The points didn't add up very fast. But then I did get out. I got out in September of 45. They was glad.
Go ahead.
They was glad to get people home, I guess. When other than they asked me if I would sign up again, but I wouldn't do that. No.
So when you came back to the States, did you expect to have to go back?
Oh no, I guess I really never thought that much about it, but I never really thought I'd have to go back, and I didn't plan on going back. But a lot of them did. A lot of them signed up and ended up going to the South Pacific, or later on, of course, the Korean War. But I didn't want anything to do with it. I'd had enough.
How did your family find out? How did they communicate?
Well, when I was captured, the Army sent a telegram to my dad, and that's how he found it out, that I was missing in action. They didn't tell him at first. They said there wasn't anything said about being captured. Then later on, when they found out I had been captured, well, then he got another telegram telling him that I had been captured. And I sent a letter or a card home. I was able to do that. Never got any mail from home, but then I sent a card home telling them that I was all right and not to worry about me. So.
Okay, get me from. Were you ever hospitalized? Were you hospitalized?
No, never. No, I was fortunate and lucky there that I was never injured or hurt in any way.
So after you came out of the prison camp, you were not even hospitalized?
No. No. Yeah, I got when I got back to Camp Lucky Strike, we stayed there about a week. They fed us a lot of eggnog and things like that, and then I don't know exactly what date it was, but middle of May, I guess, they put us on a boat, and we went across the channel and England and picked up more injured and more soldiers and came on back to New York. And let's see, I was home June the 2nd. And then I had a 60-day leave, and then I had to go to Miami, Florida for 2 weeks for rest and relaxation. And then they sent me back to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and I drove a bus there for 6 or 8 weeks, and then I was able to get out.
When you think about the days that you were prisoner of war, is there anything that, again, that stands out in your mind that if you were to close your eyes, that would be the thing that you would remember?
Well, probably the most was when they used to send you out on wood details to cut wood or gather wood, you might say, in some woods to help keep warm. It was nice to get out of prison camp. Of course, they always sent a guard with you. Maybe they'd send 6, 8, 10 men. But it was nice to get out and able to get some exercise and get away from camp. Even though you knew you was going to have to go back, but you felt a little freer when you was out with just a few people, that rather than being in a camp.
So if you were to, when you got back home, tell me about your family. You're married, and tell me how that all happened. And who did you have children?
Well, of course, I was real fortunate because my dad's birthday is June the 2nd, and that's the day I got home. And we had all the family in, and in a matter of a week or two, and we had a big dinner and celebrated, I guess, a little. And it was nice for them to know that I was home safe, and it was good to see everybody. And we lived on a farm, and everybody was able to keep busy. They didn't have to sit around and worry about me, that's for sure. But it was a joyous occasion.
Did any of your brothers serve?
I had, yes, a brother 2 years older than I did. He ended up in the South Pacific. And but he was never captured. The worst thing, I guess, was he got yellow jaundice, and I don't remember what else, but something else in the South Pacific.
What have you done? What was your career? What did you do after the war?
Well, I went back to driving truck again, and the fellow that I had drove for before service, he passed away. So we had another fellow that was in the trucking business at home, and I went to work for him. The only thing was that he hauled more cattle and things like that. Previous to the war, I'd hauled horses more than anything else, but after that, it was mostly cattle. We lived about 125 miles out of Chicago, and he hauled for an order buyer, and I'd pick up cattle at sale barns, and generally haul them into Chicago. I'd get in there 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. And that's when, my wife, of course, I wasn't married when I was in service, but then I met my wife at one of the sale barns. Her uncles run it, and she worked in the office. Although I had known her since we were kids, and she had lost her first husband in the Battle of the Bulge, and of course I like I say, I had known her a long time, but I had more or less lost contact, I guess, during the war, and didn't even know she had lost her husband at the time. But so it would be on Mondays that I would, I'd take a load into Chicago. Then on Mondays I'd come back to the sale barn where she worked and pick up a load for Monday night. And so we got to talking, and she worked in the office, and we'd get to talking, and maybe we'd end up eating supper at the sale barn, and so we got a little better acquainted and decided to get married. So that's how I happened to.
Do you have children?
Yes, we have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and they're all married. And all of them have teaching degrees, but the daughter, she doesn't teach anymore. She taught in the South Bend schools, and she had to get a master's degree. Of course, you have to do that anyway. But then her husband got transferred to a different town, to Goshen, Indiana, and then when she couldn't get a job because she had a master's degree, and they could hire somebody out of college a whole lot cheaper. So, but she's had enough to do anyway. She has 2 children, and we have the 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren.
If you think about your grandchildren, is there a message or is there something that you learned from the war that you would like to leave with them on a tape, on this tape?
Well, I suppose it'd be don't get too complacent, because you never know what's going to happen down the road, and they've had it pretty easy as far as living conditions, and that can always change. I'd hate to see it change too much, but then, I mean, it's possible, and not that any of them has lived too high or anything, but then their life can change pretty much in a matter of a few months.
Did the war make a different person, made a difference in who you've become?
Well, I suppose it has. Not that I can pinpoint any particular thing, but then I think it's made me more tolerant of other people, because I've seen how other countries live, and I wouldn't want to live like some of the other countries do. And so, but then, like I say, I haven't tried to expound on our style or anything here over some of the other countries. So I would say it probably has.
Is there anything that I have missed that I have not covered with you about the war, or things that come to your mind that you really wanted to put on the tape, but I just didn't bring it up?
You know, nothing I can really think of that I think we've covered it pretty well. You've been a big help, I'd say that. So I think that I've hit about everything that I'd like to leave for my family to hear or talk about.
We sure appreciate your time this morning, getting up so early for us and letting us get this far for the project.
Well, I'm glad to do it because I want to get some more of their information down there. I think we've got 3 of the tapes now, but then I want to get some more.